right, I might try to stall a little bit while everyone is still trickling in here. Thank y'all very much for being here. It's incredible to see the number of people who have shown up to talk about water. But I think it's a testament to how important it is and how much we all recognize that. So I want to thank Representative Morales and Representative Landgraf for being here today. I know it's an extremely busy time with elections coming up in March, and y'all are traveling around your district, so I appreciate you for making the time to be part of this conversation today. Representative Kitzman, who y'all might have seen was also on the agenda, sends his apologies. He's from much farther away. I was actually impressed that he even was going to make it out here, but he's also a big water champion, sends his apologies for not being able to make it because he's got to be in his district, which we understand. So as Billy said, my name is Vanessa Puig-Williams. I lead the water program here in Texas for Environmental Defense Fund. We are a nonprofit, and I primarily work on advancing sustainable water management in Texas, particularly groundwater, which, as we've heard today, is really, I think, the most important water resource we have, because it not only is, important in and of itself, but it sustains our springs and rivers, and is the largest source of water for ag and for rural communities across the state. I work a lot at the Capitol on water policy, but I don't think I've really ever gotten to work directly with y'all, so it's a pleasure to be talking to you here today. I know that based on where your districts are located, and we'll talk a little bit more about that in a second, water is very important to y'all and to your constituents. So before we get into this discussion about water, though, I wanted to give you all each a moment to introduce yourselves and to tell us a little bit about your district. So, Representative Morales, since we are actually in your district, which, by the way, is huge.
First, you go first.
I'm going to let you do the honors and go first and tell us a little bit about your district. And then also, why did you want to run for the Texas Legislature, too? I think would be fun to hear.
Can everyone hear me? Yes. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for coming out here to House District 74, which I may be a little bit biased, but I think it's the most beautiful district. We're opening the doors to this building and took a glance out, south, and saw the mountain thing, and saw just how beautiful Alpine is and West Texas. And, we are from Eagle Pass, which is about 5.5 hours away. So it really, there's a vast distance between our hometown and the area that we cover. We cover all the way, House District 74, for those that don't know, goes all the way to the far east section of El Paso. It's the largest district not only in Texas, but in the entire United States. And I think my staff has figured out, it done the math, and it's bigger than 15 U.S. states alone as a state representative. And I get the same budget at Brooks.
You have to pay a lot more for gas.
Yeah. So we need some changes up there. Awesome. But thank you for the opportunity. My wife, Helen, and Helen skinned up. I truly think that in order for any elected official, especially at the state, to be able to have the success that they can have, that you need that partner to be there supporting you, whether it's back home or whether it's there in the Capitol. And I can attest to Brooks' wife also. Oh my God, she's amazing. They have a great relationship. And, my wife and Brooks' wife, and that goes a long ways into making sure that we're actually doing the job. They keep us in check. This session, Helen was the president of the Legislative Ladies, which is the organization of our significant others, our spouses. It hasn't changed. It's still called Legislative Ladies, even though there's men also in there now, since we have representatives. But it goes to show the commitment that we decided to put into this once we went all in into being representatives at the state level. I wanted to thank also Brooks and Stan because I couldn't do what I do for my district without their help. I'm a Democrat. If you know how to count, you need 76 votes for anything to pass out of the House. I think it is pivotal and super important for us to recognize that we must reach across the aisle, that these extensions of far left or far right to level the aisle. And I think we need more of you all to be saying as much. Any opportunity that you have on social media, if you get asked by a reporter, if you get asked by public officials, we need to know and understand that the public is fed up. I look already, but I think a number of us don't, and that we need to bring back normalcy when it comes to public office and making sure that government is working forward. So thank you for that. And what made me decide to run? Well, I'll tell you, it's really, really difficult. But I've had an amazing mother and father that have raised us, and just, if you know my story, at the age of 12, my parents had an opportunity to open a tortilla factory back in Eagle Pass, and they completely changed our family's trajectory. It provided so many opportunities, but at the same time, I think it gave us, to my sister and I, and all of my cousins that have worked here, it gave us another way of seeing, another lens of seeing the world, and how customer-driven, how we needed to be out there to help people, how we needed to make sure that we took care of the employees, how we took care of money, how to stretch it out, all these virtues that I think that I now benefit from and that I use every single day when I'm up here as a public servant or in Austin. And so I was at a pivotal point where I was being asked for a few hours already, and they had sat me down and said, you need to be the guy. You've been sitting in training for 15 plus years. You've been a lawyer. You are a businessman. You do retail. You're into, warehousing, industrial apartments, developments. You are the guy that is to represent House District 74. But we had just left our youngest son at the University of Texas. Helen and I were done. We were ready to party and go out and have vacations. So that was the dilemma. And, picking up the phone and calling my mom for advice. If you still have your mom or your dad, if you can reach out to them, what pivotal points in your life happening, I think they said it so much in perspective. She had to talk to me for less than 3 minutes, and I got it. I understood what I needed to do. And so that's why I'm here. I'm happy to do it. I'm happy to have such a supportive wife, and my 3 kids also are amazing in our extended family. So thank you for the opportunity to represent House District 74. It is truly an honor.
Yeah, thank you. That's a great story. I think wise words about working across the aisle. One thing I love about water is that I know everyone says whiskey's for drinking, water's for fighting, but I actually think water unites us much more than it does divide us. So, Representative Landgraf, your turn.
Well, good morning, everybody. Good morning, Vanessa. Good morning, my friend, Representative Morales. It's a pleasure to be here. I do think, though, and I'll get into all the wish myself a minute, but I think I actually am up here by accident. I was actually just a registered participant.
No, that's not true.
Like all of you, I'll get into the reasons why. I was just here to listen to Eddie and all the other wonderful speakers of the Texas Water Development Board and groundwater conservation districts. And then I think somebody saw, and I just need to have a pseudonym or something. And I register next time. But anyway, was asked to be on this panel. But the reason why I was here is I'm just interested in this subject, not only policy perspective, but from a ranching landowner and West Texas perspective. And when I walked in, unfortunately, I had to miss the portion of the conference yesterday afternoon, but I pulled up to campus today and saw how many cars were in the parking lot, how many people were in this auditorium. It really warmed my heart to see that we have a vested population here in West Texas, not the ranching community, but just concerned citizens who want to make sure that we are making the right decisions when it comes to our water policy moving forward. And so I'm just happy. I'm thrilled to be here. My name is Landgraf, and I serve as state representative in House District 81, which is in the ugly part of West Texas. I think we can say, I can say that because I'm from there. I don't know anybody else say it. But I'm from Odessa and serve Hector County, Ward County, Wheatford County, and Loving County. So on the other side of the Piggy Shore. But anyway, it's an honor to represent the 200,000 people who live there, which we're not nearly spread out as they are in House District 74. And I also serve as the chairman of the House Environmental Regulation Committee. Speaker Burrows, the honor of being appointed to that chairmanship by him, and so that's actually my third session to serve in that role. And there is definitely an intersection with water policy, although it's predominantly, as we've already heard this morning, at least on the House side in the Natural Resources Committee, we deal tangentially with water policy in environmental regulation, and so that's another reason why I have this interest. So in addition to doing state representative work, as Eddie can tell you, we get paid about $600 a month to serve as a state representative. I don't know about you, by the time taxes are taken out and everything, I end up writing a check to the state of Texas for $1,000 every year, either employee. And I say all that to say that I've never been able to quit my day job while being a state representative. So I am in the ranching business, and for the ranchers in the room, I'm looking at you, Houston, and others. You know that sometimes ranching pays even worse than being a state representative does. And so, with having two very unreliable sources of income, I also practice law up in Odessa. And so those are really the three jobs that I have. But before I was a lawyer, before I was a legislator, I was in a West Texas ranching family. We actually ranch here in Worcester County, and then across the line at Pecos County. Actually, we're neighbors of Mr. Foster there in the Lost Mountains. We've been on the same tract of land since 1905, actually homesteaded it under some of the original homestead laws here in the state of Texas, and we continue to have an active cow calf operation. We raise Black Angus, used to be the sheep business, and as you all know, ranching is not really ranching, we're just in the grass growing business, and you can't grow grass unless you have water. And so this is something that I've been intimately involved with and familiar with, particularly when it comes to water in West Texas, and particularly in the Big Bend region. And so that's another reason why I'm very interested in this. One other thing that I want to say that doesn't have anything to do with water is that it's just great to be here under Hancock Hill. Again, I'm actually and is President Hernandez here?
It is that.
They have a board of regents meeting.
Yeah, that's right, Texas State Board of Regents. Well, anyway, for those of you who are associated with the university, I might be the only member of the legislature who's the alum of Sol Ross. Not a graduate. I'm a graduate of Texas A&M University, very proud to say. But I did take 6 hours of credit during the summer of 2000. Here at Sol Ross, had a couple of classes over here at Lawrence Hall. I was working on it. We had a wildfire at the ranch. I was rebuilding fence. My mother, who's also in the ranching business, was worried that if I went down and worked at the ranch rebuilding fence after the fire, that I wouldn't, I think she was worried that I would follow up too much with it and maybe not go back to school with A&M. Anyway, I did that, but I built fences in the mornings, and then when it got too hot in the afternoon, came here to take some summer school classes, and had a great experience here at Sol Ross. So it's great to be back on campus. And the last thing I do want to say is the state representative that you have here, for those of you from Bruce County, from Presidio County, and some of the other parts of HD 74. And he mentioned that we're in different political parties, but he and I collaborate on some of the things, some of those we'll talk about here in a moment. But Eddie does a fantastic job representing borderlands of the upper county of West Texas, and all the way down into Maverick County. And we're always able to, we don't even really talk about differences, whatever they are, but we've found so many ways to be able to work together. And as somebody who, in some ways he's my representative, because he represents part of the ranch. And I'm just always thrilled to see how much his heart is in it. He's also a very smart guy, very thoughtful person. and those are some qualities that you want to have. But those of you who live in House District 74 are represented by a very statesman-like State Representative Eddie Morales Jr., and y'all are lucky to have him, and I've always find it as a privilege and help him.
What do you say about something like that, right? You all know that we are tortilla manufacturers. I'm proud. My wife, we've been 38 years now in business. I started when I was 12. Now we're the owners, the proud owners. And I usually bribe Brooks with bags of tortilla chips. You don't understand how many bags of tortilla chips this just costs.
It's easy when you're a tortilla manufacturer and I'm a tortilla eater.
But it's true. You know, there's the opportunity to open doors. The Hispanic, Mexican, American way has always been, at least with the way my parents grew up, you don't ever go anywhere without food. If you're going to go to an event that you were, party or something, your family out, you show up also with food. So we did that at the Capitol for our freshman year, as we're able to deliver tortilla chips to all of the representatives that we're going to be working with, the senators, the governor's office, the state departments that we're going to be working with. It has created so many doors that have been open for us, and at least the opportunity to have something to talk about, and then that generates even more discussion points or points that we're actually, in conjunction even marked with. So it's been amazing to collaborate with somebody like Brooks, who's been there a lot longer than I had, and that's the key also. You have people like Brooks up there that understand this is just a title of state representative. Yes, you have to run 2 years, and yes, you're in session, and his chairmanship, he doesn't taunt it or throw it around. He's very easy and very, very good to work with when it comes to issues that he, and he understands that sometimes he may not be in support of a specific request, but he knows that it's important for his district, and these kids would be out.
So water unites, but tortillas also unite.
Tortillas unite.
Okay. Are we going to eat tortillas during lunch?
Well, before we go, I want to make sure that Brooks tells us why he decided to run.
Oh yeah, you didn't say that.
And then we'll talk about water. Yeah. No, so just to make this part very quick. I was raised in a family, I think, like so many of us, where when you enjoy the blessings of a great place like Texas, in particular West Texas, and you have been given so much in your life, it's almost sinful to take and not give back. And I wasn't raised to be a state representative, but I was raised to give back to the people who gave so much to me. And out of the reason it worked out to where there was an opportunity for me to serve in this capacity. And for me, it's worked out where this is how I can give back to others. And so there are a number of other specific issues, but it comes from a love for the people that I serve, that I represent. And I love the state that I just want to do my part to make positive contributions and serve others.
We thank you both for your service. Okay, so let's turn to why we are here today, which is to talk about water. And I know that a lot of y'all were here yesterday when we had a good overview of all of the water issues facing West Texas, but I'll just do a very brief recap just to make sure we're all on the same page. Although it may not feel like it out here, Texas's population is growing. The state demographer estimates that there's about 1,200 people per day that are calling Texas home, moving here, being born here. So that's a lot of population growth. Most of this population growth is occurring outside of major metropolitan areas and those some rural areas that don't have sustainable sources of water. And so that is a big concern. And so what that means is that we're often seeing cities who are looking for more water to turn to rural areas of the state who are perceived to have excess water. And so that's a big question. Is there excess water or not? We talked a little bit about how you might determine that earlier on the science panel. We also have a water infrastructure problem in Texas. We heard from Jennifer Walker from the National Wildlife Federation yesterday that Texas loses on average 186 million, is it million or billion? I think it's billion, yes. Billion gallons of water a year due to aging and leaky pipes. And that's very expensive to fix. That's about the amount of water that would fill a large reservoir or the combined water usage for Austin, Fort Worth, El Paso, and Laredo. Oh, and Lubbock too. So it's a lot of water that's leaking through those pipes. Then we introduced drought. We heard from Dr. Nielsen Gammon about how overall Texas is becoming drier. West Texas may not necessarily be experiencing more droughts, but our droughts are lasting longer and they're getting hotter. And so that affects soil moisture, it affects recharge rates to our aquifers, and that affects the people who are relying on groundwater out here in West Texas. So against this concerning backdrop, the legislature took historic action last session to make Texas's water security a little less precarious. The governor made water a priority issue, an emergency item, and members from across the aisle, and both of y'all voted for this unprecedented water package, which became Proposition 4, and that provides $20 million over the next 20 years for water supply and infrastructure projects in the state. And last November, voters, hopefully many of y'all voted for that, approved this historic investment. So, as I mentioned, both of y'all supported this water package, and so I'm hoping that you can share a little bit about some of the water challenges that your districts are facing, and how you see these Prop 4 dollars, when they do become available, benefiting your constituents and the communities in your districts. Representative Landgraf, do you want to start?
Sure. Well, very briefly, Proposition 4 is important, and thank you all for voting for it. That was something the legislature needed to do, but this was such a historic investment. We needed to amend the Texas Constitution to be able to spend money on water infrastructure and new water sources for such an extended period of time. And so voters were necessary to make that happen. So thank you, the people of Texas, for also making this a reality. Let me start with the bad news on Proposition 4, because there's plenty of good news. The bad news is that this is not a silver bullet, and I don't want to be one of those politicians who says, all right, we did this, we fixed it, it's done. That's not true. This is like a first step. It's a $20 billion investment over 20 years, but the problem that we're trying to address is, as many of you know, closer to at least a $100 billion problem. So we can't just do this and then forget about it, because that's going to be insufficient. But it is a good way to get us on the right track. And another important thing to note about Proposition 4 is that it's basically split roughly into two equal pots. About $10 billion is designed to secure new water resources. That can be anything from the desalinization of brackish water or desalinization of water from the Gulf of Mexico to importing water from the Mississippi River watershed, for example, into Texas. Really trying to not leave no stone unturned in the quest for water, so that we can protect the resources that we have. If we're thinking beyond our state borders, we're using emerging technologies to acquire that, and that's what we want to do. So about half the money is for that. The other half is for water infrastructure, particularly for the replacement of aging water infrastructure. And this is more of an issue for end user customers, not as much of an issue it's really just where the people are, but for municipalities to sell water, for example, Vanessa, where I come from, in the summer of 2022, we were without water for 5 days because the water main line broke. Similar stories have happened in San Antonio and Laredo and all across the state. And the reason why we're starting to see that is so many of our communities experienced a post-World War II population boom, and a lot of infrastructure in cities all across Texas and really all across the country were built up in the late 1940s and early 1950s. And when you look at just the materials to get water pipelines, that has about a 75-year lifespan. Well, here we are. It's more than 75 years, and a lot of those pipelines have reached the end of their useful lives. So they've just deteriorated, kind of the way that they were always expected to. But because so many of us, at every level, government kind of buried our head in the sand and didn't address it because it wasn't a crisis yet, there was not a lot of preventative work that was done on that. And so now we're seeing places all over Texas that are experiencing a crisis. And the only thing that's they can fix that is money. It's an expensive problem to fix. You have to dig up the old pipe, replace the new pipe, and that's really the equation that we're seeing. Of course, the Texas Water Development Board is well positioned to help with that, and all they need is money to do that, and that's one thing that this is being dedicated to. So Prop 4, $20 billion, not a silver bullet, just a start, and really is going to those two general purposes: finding new water sources, creating or otherwise, and then also making sure that we have infrastructure in place to deliver that water. But it's a big plan, and we're going to have to keep that momentum going.
Do you want to comment a little bit on how you see that money being utilized in your district, or what some of the challenges you're facing?
Well, I think yes. I think most districts across the state are going to need to have infrastructure, water infrastructure, and delivery addressed on some level, and I think that's probably the biggest attack that it would have on the people that I serve.
I think to me, to answer that question, to me, the way as representing the 11 counties, many of them in rural West Texas, the problem that I see is a lack of personnel to be able to go in and administratively do the workforce too. But I'm talking just I'm talking just I'm talking just in general to even apply for that funding. Many of the cities or local governments that I represent don't have grant writers, don't have people that have the expertise to do that. And so what we're doing, at least in our office, is making sure that we provide all 11 counties with information with respect to grant funding and stuff like that. We even try to provide links to the actual website that you can go to that will have that application. Something that, as city attorney, knowing and for the city of Eagle Pass for so many years and seeing the inner workings of personnel, I noticed that was a deficiency. And as a city that was growing fast, where I can only imagine what smaller communities are going through. So I know that that's a challenge, and I'm trying to address it that way. But I know also 20 other ideas that the public may have with respect to how do we get this down to the micro level so that the right people are getting it done.
And I believe some of those Prop 4 dollars are to be utilized for that kind of technical assistance. So that's a huge plus there.
Yeah, when you're competing though with some of these other huge cities that already have, you're that far back, and then you try to get sometimes you're going to have to contract because you won't even get the right personnel to actually want to go to this part of the state of Texas. I also support most of the comments as well that Brooks mentioned. This is just the start. We should not rest and claim victory by no means. Everything that we see out there tells us that it's a drop in the bucket to ultimately where we need to be. We're already at a little bit over 30 million. In 10 years, I believe, by 2040, we're going to have 10 more million people moving to Texas. We're already at a disadvantage, and we're trying to catch up. And just imagine what that will do. Plus, now you have some elected leaders up here that are championing all of the good that Texas has been able to deliver, and we want more folks to come in, especially like in my district. I'm huge on economic growth, but that's what's the problems that I've seen. I'm trying to push places like Paso, Presidio, and its international bridge and everything that can come from that if we're able to convince the legislature to turn it over. Presidio's international bridge is the only bridge owned by the state of Texas. So we're trying to get that over to the county so that then they can generate some revenue from those toll crossings, and then they can actually do something with their community. The city of Eagle Pass right now is going to two major international bridge projects. One which has already obtained its presidential permit. We are a community, Maverick County, our hometown. There's 70,000 people right there right now. In the next 15 years, under that Puerto Verde project alone, it is estimated that we're going to have 150,000 people moving. Our school district will go from a poor school district to a rich school district overnight and over $124 million annually in property and sales tax that it'll receive. I want to champion that. I want to make sure that I have the right infrastructure, and it's only going to happen with collaboration between Republicans, Independents, and Democrats to make sure that we're there, especially when I truly think that the border is the next pathway for Texas to continue to shine it. We need to focus on the border, and we need to make sure that we're delivering the goods that most of the other part of the state have received, but we haven't. Yeah.
Sorry, one thing that I forgot to do now on the infrastructure portion for funding. One thing that's important to note is that money is actually going to go a lot farther because if a municipality, for example, borrows that money to rebuild pipeline infrastructure in its community, it's a low interest loan that has to be paid back to the Texas Water Fund, meaning that it can be recycled several times over. So that's important to note that allows us to get even more bang for the taxpayer's dollar on that. And I think that's important. It's about helping me balance college.
Let's turn to groundwater for a few minutes. And you mentioned, Representative Morales, about the border. Communities along the Rio Grande, and farmers have been relying on surface water for a long time, but as that's becoming less reliable, as we've heard today and yesterday, they're turning to groundwater. And I know we also heard about how the legislature is kind of taking a renewed interest in groundwater management and how we as a state can ensure that groundwater is managed more sustainably with more data to make better decisions. This part of Texas relies almost exclusively on groundwater. I'm wondering if you could share a bit about some of the concerns you're hearing from your district about groundwater supplies and what the future might hold for communities who are concerned about groundwater levels and maybe looking for alternative sources of water.
Well, first of all, I want to make sure that I'm clear about this. Cattle ranching for farming should be our top priority, especially out here in West Texas. And obviously, I hear it almost on a regular basis, on a weekly basis, from those folks that are in that industry, and they just see their returns just they keep winning. So it's important to me. I think we also need to focus on groundwater districts, and right now we're seeing a big issue at Kinney County. It's to the north of Maverick, that Kinney County Groundwater Conservation District. Some of the board members, I think, are not going to say this without editing them. I just think that I need to listen more to their decisions, and there are many out there that are in disapproval of the way that the groundwater district board is right now moving forward. With some of the actions of actually being open to taking the water out of Pitts County and having it transferred somewhere else. And I think you need to first consider your community, your area, your region, or you're able to look out. And if you cannot even provide the basis for those cattlemen or those farmers, then why are you even considering going out and distributing your water to somewhere else? And to a certain extent, you have the balance. So we need to balance, yes, the economic side of it, yes, the profits that come from a business like that, but then also, what are you doing to those who taking it?
Of course, that goes back to needing data and science to be able to understand that.
And part of I've been there, the meetings have been full of these groundwater conservation districts with constituents. And, it struck me as odd that we are in this day and age and we still lack some of the basic, data that is necessary for these groundwater conservation districts to make informed decisions over whether they have the capacity to be able to authorize the selling of water to other parts. And that's a way that you're already trying to figure out, as I left this last meeting there at Kinney County, is how do we as a state, the state legislature, work to provide a basic ground level framework for these conservation, these groundwater districts to be able to succeed.
Yeah, exactly. Well, Representative Landgraf, I'm actually interested to hear your perspective, but more so as a rancher in this district.
Well, I mean, that's kind of how that's immediately where my mind went, is that you have to work, almost exclusively rely on groundwater. And so my entire adult life, the undertaking of our range, probably just like everybody else, this is great. We've consistently draws in some cases we've had wells that just had to be water mills that kind of been completely abandoned and then kind of down into on a 25-section ranch down to about 4 producing water wells, and we had to dig those deeper about every 6 or 7 years. There are also some other existential concerns about that because, generally speaking, at Trans-Vegas, for the last 25 years or so, we've had, the precipitation levels a bit lower than we would like. I think that relatively consistent in such a way that the precipitation does not correlate to that kind of dropping in the water table. And so there are obviously some other demands being made on that that's just kind of beyond the typical agricultural uses. And so there are definitely some policy questions around that. But I guess to put this in a policy context, and we'll get into some of the details about what the water conversation was like beyond just Proposition 4 during this past legislative session of 2025. But one, and you've heard this is consistently, everybody who's been up on stage so far is, at least it passes referenced data when it comes to water. And if because of the environment that we have in Texas, so we are the only Western state that's a right of capture state, and that's a whole different conversation that I don't like to get into. But
we're going to do that this afternoon.
That's absolutely.
You don't have to do that right now.
But that's absolutely part of the equation. But in between that, so you have that on one hand, and then on the other hand, water is kind of democratized a little bit with the existence of groundwater conservation districts, right? Now, the concern with that, and then we have the wonderful Texas Water Development Board, which serves a very useful function, and the legislature is only giving them more and more responsibility to help manage the long-term water plans for the state of Texas. But you don't really have a centralized water policy. Water Development Board's not a regulator in the sense that we have other state agencies that regulate different policy areas. And the reason why that's important is that you just have a whole bunch of different water jurisdictions all over a very large state, and there's a lot of value in that. I'm not knocking the structure of that because I think that it is useful. It does kind of localize water, and it has been successful, at least in some ways, of preventing the wholesale export of water from reaching the desert where it needs it. Although not all cases, and that's another conversation that I like to get into. But having that kind of passage over different jurisdictional lines means that we have not communicated very well. And if we do want to have a clear picture of what the groundwater situation is, the surface water situation is in the state, that we need to have better communication, better transfer of data among the local entities as well as the Water Development Board. And that is something that we were able to prove on in the 2025 legislative session. You heard the grant speeches earlier that groundwater conservation districts can apply for it to help get that data. And then we want to have better, and I think we're already starting in the early stages, but we're already starting to see better communication, not only among groundwater conservation districts, but from groundwater conservation districts to the Water Development Board, and also better data reporting when it comes to all different types of hydrology reports, but then also when it comes to aquifer mapping and understanding what's going on in aquifers under the ground, underground a little bit better, so from mapping aquifers all the way to metering, getting a better picture. And you heard everybody else say it, but having that kind of data is absolutely essential to making good at South policy. If we don't know that picture that we've got blinders on, and that's a terrible situation to be in. So thankfully, we have taken a lot of those steps. And I do want to say, Eddie and I are both members of the
Water
Caucus, and we have some representatives from, and also sponsored by the Texas Water Foundation, who have been very helpful. We do have a pretty robust membership of legislators who are part of that, which is good news because it shows how much you're hearing from our constituents about this and knowing that something needs to be done. And also that you're going to hear from Tracy King a little bit later, but Tracy was instrumental in getting that caucus off the ground before he left the House. But I think we are starting to see some of the policies coming from the legislature. We're starting to see the Water Caucus of Water Foundation is beginning to bear fruit, and I think it's a post.
Yeah, I think that in days past, it seemed like the members of the House Natural Resources Committee were the only ones who kind of benefited from water education, and the Texas Water Foundation with the Water Caucus has really expanded that and is growing a whole lot of new water champions. So kudos. And so let's talk a minute about what y'all see. Well, let's back up. What were some of the wins from last session that you both worked on with respect to water, and what do you see as some of the priority issues for next session?
Well, my staff had to remind me, I think it was HB 500, where we appropriated also $2.5 billion for Texas water. So that was another.
The one-time appropriation.
That was a one-time, yes. Plus, of course, crop board that we supported. Supporting at the local level these groundwater conservation districts in the West. We're working with the constituents of Kidd County, for example, to make sure that there's the representation that is out there by the board actually equals what the constituents actually want. Because right now, though, some of these decisions are rural in nature, and it truly doesn't represent what the constituents of where they live are requesting. Those are the top two that I have off the top of my head.
You had the bill for pristine stream designation in Valverde County, right?
I'm gonna get after my staff. Now the Devil's River is beautiful, and for us to be able to preserve and protect that so where no discharge can take place, and to have, I think the vote also was high up there, and to have the support again, folks on the across the aisle was instrumental for us to send a message. As you know now, the House chamber is the only true chamber that represents constituents to me. I'm sorry to say.
It's a good thing that Senator Blanco's not here.
With the field, Senator Blanco has been amazing to work with, as well as a number of other senators. But I mean, that chamber is going through its growing pains, like I would say. And as much as we want to work with them, we have some amazing projects in the House that we're championing. And they'll get 135, 140 out of 150 votes. And then we won't even get a hearing on that Senate. And this all goes back to our constituents in the state of Texas, who they vote for. Don't just vote because of party affiliation. Vote for the best person that you know is going to be doing what's best for the entire state of Texas, not just for a party. And I think that we've lost sight to a certain extent. And I think we all need a reminder that what's truly important. And so saying that, there's been a number of projects that have been held back for at least House Legislature 4 that could have truly been game changers for Presidio. For example, on that International Bridge Board legislation that was stopped at the 11th hour intermediate legislative process, also on the Senate side. And for example, this Port Authority bill in Eagle Pass that I was trying to also support so that we could have some framework of this gigantic project, especially when the community was asking for a checks and balances and not just have a developer go on credit and not take into account what the constituents also wanting as a construction by environmental issues are going to impact the river forward with the international bridge and the railroad bridge that we're going to be coming in over that project. And unfortunately, it also got like 142 votes. We sent it over to the Senate, and we couldn't even get a hearing because of a senator from Far East Texas that just decided, no connection to the board, just decided that everything on the board was cartel related, as I was told. And that's why we didn't probably provide the next injection that was needed on the border to really take the projects like this. Again, 150,000 people over the next 15 years. a ginormous, billion-dollar annual project, GDP to the region. Sometimes it's upsetting that people that have nothing to do with your district can actually create damage, chaos to what you think is the best for and what your constituents are telling you is best for your own district.
Representative Landgraf.
I know we're taking short on time, so I'm just going to lay it out what I think I want to talk about in addition to this. And this is all part of the question. I don't want West Texas to be treated like an extraction colony by the rest of the state.
So,
Eddie's been in this fight with me, and I know you all agree. I don't preach to the choir, but here's how that manifests. I don't want West Texas to be treated like an extraction colony. We have two things that are going on that I'm going to be hyper-focused on, and we've been able to address a little bit of it in 2025, but I think it's surrounded by produced water, and then resources that we have, particularly in the Permian Basin, the entire state that have been scrubbed. Eddie and I were co-authors together of something called the Texas Climate Defense Fund. This is something that passed overwhelmingly in the Texas House, suffered the same fate in the Senate. What the Texas Climate Defense Fund would do, in addition to some other things, is it would take a portion of oil and gas severance tax, most of which is produced here in West Texas, and instead of putting it into the overflowing rainy day fund that is about to reach its constitutional cap, it would divert some of that money that's not going to schools, not going to roads, but the money that would otherwise be going to the rainy day fund. It's diverted into a fund that can help clean up leaking oil and gas wells. It's actually and to help clean up other environmental concerns in the oil field. It's using money from the oil field to address oil field problems. It makes all the sense in the world to me. Senator Longo was actually the Senate sponsor of that, but we've got to find a way to get that heard in the Senate Finance Committee. I think that goes a long way. That's also part of the other problem, which is produced water. Now, produced water is a burden and a blessing if we do it the right way. Right now, it's a burden because we're extracting as part of oil and gas operations, which I'm a big fan of, by the way. I never apologize for that. The produced water that comes from the subsurface strata, sometimes thousands of feet deep, things that this is water that you normally don't get from drilling the water at all. It's so much deeper, and it has all sorts of other nasty stuff in it in a lot of cases. And so we can go through a filtration process that's fairly expensive, but we really haven't found a good solution to what to do with this produced water when it's brought up to the surface. And in a lot of cases, and I know we have some people in the back of the room who can talk about, at least in most parts of West Texas, it's injected into the ground at a pretty shallow level that creates a whole host of other problems that we have not been able to get a handle on it. Now, that's the part blessing is that that's still water. We're not going to treat it, at least not coming right out there. It's in most cases not suitable for agricultural use, but it can be put to a higher, more beneficial use through a variety of ways. Some of it does require a filtration process, but if we're talking about data centers, for example, I know that's a big concern that a lot of us have. If that type of water can be used for cooling at least portions of the data center operations, that's a good way to kill two birds with one stone. I think that's some of the things that we need to be looking at. During this past session, I found a bill it passed that transfers the land application use for produced water. The jurisdiction for issuing those permits out away from the Railroad Commission, which, as you all know, has nothing to do with railroads, has everything to do with regular oil and gas. We moved that permitting authority from the Railroad Commission to the Texas Commission on Environmental Quality because they have all the water experts. They're in a much better position from a state agency perspective to issue those permits. That process is underway right now, and it is a good way for us to start being smarter about using that water so that we can actually use it to our advantage and not let it create environmental calamity all across the oil patch, which it is doing. And so always looking for ways to pull to first one scope, but I think that's scope of the bill. We need to focus as a state, and that's what I'm going to be fighting for if I'm invited back for the next session.
But I do want to say, yes. As the Vice Chair of Energy Resources, I'm a big supporter of the oil and gas industry. And I understand, I mean, that's where we really make the money and to be able to have, money for schools, and roads, and all of this. At the same time, I think if my parents' upbringing reminds me that a true friend will give you constructive criticism and will always be truthful and honest and help it to you. And so as a friend of the industry, I think it's also imperative for us to be able to provide constructive criticism and to let them know that they also create a lot of the messes that we're addressed with this, the way that they do the processing and all of the water that is taken out. The data was like, man, the barrels that would come out of the water were enough to where you'd have to raise the bridges, if it was the Nueces River or were to be refilled with that water. So it just puts things in perspective that we also need to challenge the industry to do better and to make sure that they're just not also part of the problem, but part of the solution. And I think when you have folks like, Judge McKenzie fighting out there for some funding in far West Texas, you have Judge Pennington here, also wanting emergency and ambulatory services at the regional level because he has to do so much with so little. You have Judge Portillo down in Presidio, who's trying to get just trained physicians to be able to live and work out of Presidio so that we can provide those basic medical services to those constituents and so on with the rest of the 11, 12 counties that are represented. I think it puts things in perspective that we need to think outside the box. It sure makes sense that now we're reaching that tipping point that our piece of legislation that we're championing, that it should be the way, hey, let's take some of this excesses and put it here to make sure that we re-inject it into the part that's actually the golden goose that's laying those golden eggs, and it's West Texas.
Well, I think I am looking forward to working with y'all next session. Many of the people in the audience too. We unfortunately do not have time for questions. So I encourage y'all to come find these gentlemen during lunch and ask your questions. But just thank you both so much for being here. I think this was really good.